where we ask the question, where does the source reside? And if it's not going to reside in the content marketing organization itself, either because of politics, budgets, functions, or just strategy, then we start to look at a story helping organization as a means of saying, great, let's empower them to actually be the voice, but maybe not the source of the actual thought leadership or the content itself.
Welcome to the Magnificent Marketing Podcast, where we interview the top marketing experts in the world and keep you up to date on all the changes and best practices to help you grow your business and stay on the cutting edge. Welcome to the show. Hello, everyone. I'm here today again with Robert Rose, and Robert is the Chief Troublemaker for the Content Advisory, which is the education and consulting division for the Content Marketing Institute. Robert helps develop content and customer experience strategies for large enterprises such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Oracle, Allstate Insurance, McCormick Spices, Capital One, AT&T, and UPS, helping them create powerful customer experiences through digital media. As an author, Robert's book, Experiences, The Seventh Era of Marketing, has been called a call to arms and a self-help guide for creating the experiences that consumers will fall in love with. He co-hosts a podcast, The Old Marketing, with Joe Pulizzi, frequently a top 20 marketing podcast on iTunes and more than 1 million downloads since its launch. Robert's book with Joe, Managing Content Marketing, is widely considered the owner's manual of the content marketing process. It's been translated into multiple languages and spent 2 weeks as a top 10 marketing book on Amazon.com. And today, we are going to be talking about content production, solely for the content marketing team, or is it time to get others involved? Robert, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, David. It's always great to be here with you.
Yeah, always fun talking with you. Love watching you speak on stage, so having you on the podcast is a complete and utter joy for me.
Yeah, they say I've got a face for podcasts. There you go.
I'll let that one lie. Well, for those new to content marketing, which, I don't know, in this day and age, I guess there's still some people new or getting into it. Just real quick, since we're going to be talking about content production, content marketing, just give your very brief definition of what content marketing means to you.
Sure, no problem. I mean, look, so I'll give you two. One is sort of the definition that we put out on the website, and that we when asked to write it down, we would use, and then I'll just sort of give it to you in plain language, because I think the definition that we write down is, it's a little wordy and maybe overly formal, and it's really this idea of owning your audience instead of renting it, which is creating, curating, or creating owned media experiences that help to alter a customer's behavior in your favor. And again, that's a mouthful of words. What it really means, in our view, is using owned media experiences, blogs, digital magazines, your website, email programs, webinars, print magazine, events, whatever those things are that you own as media experiences, to build an audience that you can monetize in multiple ways and truly move your marketing programs forward by engaging those audiences with great, wonderful, amazing content that doesn't describe the value of your products and services, but just provides value in and of itself. So it's entertaining, it's engaging, it's educational, whatever that content may be. The value is in the content, not in your product or service.
Let me just point out, let me just say this to everybody, because sometimes, every now and then, we think people get it, and then they come back and it's different. Not about your company.
No.
This is about how you can help the people who buy from your company. And that is not talking about your stuff. Now, in the whole marketing equation, sure, you're going to have consideration pieces where you have testimonials and product descriptions down the funnel. But content marketing, to even get people to that stage, the latter stages of the buying journey, it's all about the audience and the customer and their needs, their wants, their goals, how you can help them. Make sure that that's understood. Okay. Awesome. I don't want to get into that too much, because today we're going to be concentrating on a specific aspect of all of this, content production. And we're going to assume that you have all the necessary steps. In other words, defining your purpose, your goals, your audience, your story, your tilt, your content marketing mission statement. We're going to assume all of that's already set up. It's a big assumption. So let me just say,
a giant, huge assumption. Yeah.
That is a giant, huge assumption. But you can go back and you can learn from Robert. You can go to our podcast with Robert, with Joe. We talk ad nauseum about all of those things. We did a fantastic podcast with Robert about where, before you get going with content marketing, this is where you begin. And that's where we go through all of that. But we already did a podcast on that, so we don't want to spend the time there today. We're going to get very granular here and talk about specifically, the content production. So, I know it's an assumption, but go back and learn and then come here, okay? All right, so Robert, what's your initial take here? Should this be solely on the shoulders of the content marketing team, or should other team members across various departments start to get involved here?
Well, the interesting part of that question is that there is no one good answer, and the reason for that is because it's different shoes for different size feet. And what I mean by that is that, and we actually explain this, we talk through this quite a bit, where we talk about the different kinds of functional organizations that exist with content marketing. So maybe in a perfect world, it would all reside into a content marketing team or a content marketing department, et cetera. But most companies either aren't at that stage or won't ever be at that stage. And so I sort of segment it into two different types. One is what I call the storytelling organization, which is where your content creation and production group is one team. It's a separate group. It handles all editorial or content marketing related content. And again, just to your point, separate from maybe testimonials or brochures or catalogs or that kind of content. It handles that which is editorial content only. And it manages those platforms, the blog, the digital magazine, the email newsletter, et cetera. It is created and focused on purely a content marketing remit as part of its responsibility in the organization. Then what we have on the other side of that is something I call a story helping organization, which is a bit of a hybrid in the world of how we set up a content management and marketing function in a business, where in many cases the creation and or production of the content itself comes from edges of the business. Very common, by the way, in financial services companies, where the subject matter expertise may be way out at the edges of the organization, or in consultants or those kinds of things, who are not going to be part of the content marketing organization, but do produce that which we want to repackage, use, create for SEO, really optimize for whatever experience we're managing, where the content marketing team in that particular case handles some sort of shared services model with the rest of the organization to handle SEO, persona development, content packaging and promotion, content rewriting and smashing together different pieces to create different kinds of pieces that might be used. But the content creation and production process may actually reside outside of that organization. And obviously there are blurred lines between those two, and it's kind of a Venn diagram, if you will. Mm-hmm. But mostly what we see is where we ask the question, where does the source reside? And if it's not going to reside in the content marketing organization itself, either because of politics, budgets, functions, or just strategy, then we start to look at a story helping organization as a means of saying, great, let's empower them to actually be the voice, but maybe not the source of the actual thought leadership or the content itself.
Yeah, I understand. So it sounds like you do suggest somebody being in charge.
Oh,
yeah. Just to be clear about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like and I'm with you. There's not going to be one right answer, and I appreciate you saying that. For very large organizations, you're going to have many more layers to this, and needs more content, and you're going to need to. But you also have more opportunity in the form of bandwidth, right? And then on the flip side of that, you might have some people that don't have any bandwidth, and they need help, and then then you have a department that takes care of it.
It's that I like to call that person in charge the arbiter of good. You know what I mean? And which means that you've got to have someone who can tell, especially in the story helping organization, you've got to have someone who can say, this is not, we're not going to publish this. You know, I was working with a university that was a perfect example of this, where the two folks who were in charge of content marketing came up to me at the end of a workshop and they said, "Oh my gosh, we're so excited. We now have a content marketing strategy." And I said, "Tell me about it." And they said, "Well, we're now in charge of all of the publishing across the blog and the website and our email newsletter." And I said, "Great. Where are you getting your content?" And they said, "Well, we mine it from the professors and some of the thought leaders that we have on the university." And I said, "Wonderful." I said, "How much are you saying no to?" And they kind of looked at me like my dog looks at me when I blow a whistle. And they said, what do you mean by that? And I said, "Well, which ones are you turning away because they don't meet your mission or they don't meet your story or they're not quite right?" And they went, "Well, we don't turn away any of it. We publish all of it." And I said, "Well, no, then you don't have a content marketing strategy. You're just a filter. You're just a dam, you know, controlling how much water goes over the top." And basically, if you don't have the ability to say no or to change or to iterate with those subject matter experts, you're really losing. You might as well just let everybody publish everything, because you're just basically, you know, filtering out, you know, and managing the flow. You're not actually creating the content marketing as a focused strategy.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm hearing you. And what brought you to this line of thinking? I know if you just close your eyes and take yourself back 8 years or whenever y'all started, you know, Content Marketing Institute and everything. I'm assuming at the beginning you're like, this probably evolved from like, okay, you have your team and they're going to take care of this and they're going to do, and then you started to realize like, holy shit, we need to use people in our company. There's so many other people that could tell the story better, that might be good on video and might want to do this, or might have a thought here, might have a thought there, and then all of a sudden it just grows. And the more, you know, and I've talked to, I don't even know which, if it's like Michael Brenner or Andrew, you know, I've had other conversations about this as well, but not 3 years ago, but within this last 12 months, I'm hearing more and more and getting, you know, other people involved and everything. So what brought you to where you are right now into thinking that like, okay, we need to tap into employees? Like, is there anything that happened? Anything that you saw, like, you kind of see where I'm getting at? Because I know it starts there, because I never heard that from the back in the day.
I can tell you exactly the pivot point for most, well, maybe not for most, but for many businesses. And the pivot point was in the early days, and if we go back, you know, let's call it 10 years, right? So let's call it the last 10 years, you know, go back to 2008 or 2007. And as we were all freaking out about the stock market and where the financial state of the world was, basically content marketing at that time was still an experiment, a early experiment for most companies. And so those that were actually trying to do it were trying as best they could to get content out of the organization, and quite frankly couldn't. Their people were too busy. Their subject matter experts didn't really care that much. They had other things to do. They were really struggling with getting any kind of content for any kind of owned media platform, really hard. And so what a lot of them did, and this, you know, really begat the growth of all of the sort of freelance networks that we see today, is they began pulling it in from their agencies and from freelance networks and from other areas, and started to populate their owned media channels with all of this freelance content, because they quite simply just couldn't depend on their internal organization to do it. Mm-hmm. The pendulum started to swing as we came into 2012, 2013, 2014, and all of a sudden the growth of popularity of content marketing, and in many cases the efficacy of it, it became something that really worked in many cases. Now all of a sudden everybody wanted to contribute content. And the challenge is that in so many businesses, one of two things happened. Either everybody went, oh, that team got a lot of success with content marketing, but they're using a lot of freelancers. Well, we'll just create our own channel, says the product management group or the brand group or the PR group or the other group. We'll just create our own strategy and we'll start creating tons and tons of content. All of a sudden, it's now you've got a content monster on your hand. Or if they do actually have some sort of focused production strategy like we talked about in the beginning of the show, well, then you had everybody and their dog saying, hey, I want to contribute, I want to contribute, I want to contribute, and they have this avalanche of content that doesn't really meet what they're trying to do. And so they're basically saying they're so grateful that anybody now wants to. It's like now they don't want to say no because they're scared that faucet is going to get turned off at some point. And so you have this sort of pendulum swing of too much now of content that is being put into, either from an on-demand perspective, the content group is getting more and more and more demanded of it, or they've seen the reverse happen, which is now every department has their own content marketing strategy, and they're trying to get their arms around all of the different random acts of content that are getting produced, and they're trying to, put some order to the madness.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, I mean, you go through Mark Schaefer, right? The Content Shock, right? That was Mark Schaefer.
I love Mark to death. I'm not a huge fan of the Content Shock idea. I just don't believe it.
No, I hear you, but the point is that there was a lot of, to speak to your point, there was a lot of content that started coming out, right? Yeah, and I also don't think that there's there's never too much. It's just possibly too long.
My point is that there's always been too much. I mean, since Gutenberg invented the printing press, there's been too much for us to consume.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
I gotcha.
Yeah, it's not a supply side problem. It's not that there's too much good stuff and that basically you're having to fight above the noise of all of this stuff. It's basically there's always been too much good stuff, and quite frankly, it became too easy to create bad stuff. And so exactly what we were just talking about, now everybody thinks they're a writer and everybody thinks they're, so they create all this stuff that we feel like, not because we're trying to rise above the noise of the ocean of content that's out there, but simply the internal pressure of trying to publish everything is what's making us publish stuff. Mm-hmm. Everybody recognizes intelligently, if you ask them, they'll say, yeah, we don't, ask any company and the person within that company who's in charge of content if they recognize that what they're doing isn't their best work, and 9 times out of 10 they'll go, yeah, I'm not producing my best work because I just have too much pressure to publish. Mm-hmm. And so that's not a supply problem. It's actually let's take time to figure out what the demand is and take our time and do this the right way. That's the challenge.
Gotcha. And I think that kind of leads me to something I wanted to discuss with you. Kind of a nice segue here to the content as product. I saw where you wrote about this in one of your blog posts, and I think it really speaks to what we're touching on here. Can you talk about this for a little bit?
I can. It is a really nice segue out of what we were just talking about, which is where we are seeing, companies succeed with this is where they actually look at the content that they're creating for the platforms they are creating it as it resembles much more of a product development methodology than it does campaigns. Mm-hmm. And so, the dirty secret, if it is even one, of content marketing is that it costs more, it takes longer, and it's harder to do. It's just harder to create a valuable piece of content than it is to create an ad or to create a search ad or some piece of collateral, et cetera, et cetera. It's just harder. And so the difficulty there is that in many cases, and this is exactly that pressure that we were just talking about, the pressure on the organization, the content marketing strategist, if you will, is content marketing is currently in most businesses looked at as a replacement for advertising or collateral or catalog or whatever it is, right? And so the same value is put on that widget. This is that pressure. Well, and in fact, I literally had a company say to their team, and the team was frustrated by this. They said, look, we just saw research that the average blog post takes 3 hours to create. Thereby, 3 times 28, you should be able to create X number of blogs per week. And man, is that just a silly way of looking at life.
That's such a weird way.
And so the challenge is that if we look at the production of what it is we're creating, whether it is a digital magazine or a blog or a resource center or a webinar program or an event or all of the above, as products that we create for the purpose of building an audience, it changes the calculus of how and why we create content. If it's a product, it deserves promotion, so it should have its own little marketing budget. If it's a product, it deserves a product life cycle where we actually put things through the requisite value and creation and quality assurances that we would any product we're putting out into the market. Mm-hmm. It basically is a different way of looking at the output of what it is we're doing, and thus it has a different measurement approach to it as well. It's not going to be measured just on clicks and views and click-throughs and leads, but rather, what is our purpose with this? It's to build an audience for many different goals, which it has to have in order to really be worth doing. So it's going to help us be more efficient. It's going to help us deliver better customers. It's going to help us have better insight into our product development. It's going to help us even draw revenue in some cases. So the different goals that a content marketing platform can provide to infuse into all parts of the business really are predicated on the idea that we look at what it is we're producing as a product and that it has value to the business beyond just that which would be provided in a banner ad or a piece of collateral that we would throw out.
Yeah, and I think thank you for that. And I think you had an example, like it's basically like you're producing a magazine, y'all produce a magazine, and you separate that from your content marketing. It's like you have your magazine, you have your content marketing.
That's exactly right.
Is that right?
We look at our perfect example, right? We look at our print magazine, and we have a print magazine that we treat like a product. And if you're international, we have, paid subscriptions, but you get it for free basically otherwise. And we have, I think, at this point, 35 or 40,000 subscribers to the print magazine that we send out, at this point, 4 times a year. Mm-hmm. And that print magazine is looked at, treated, et cetera, like a product. It has its own little promotional budget. It has its own, the focus, its product manager. It's got its own, content. It's got its own. We look at it as it has its own audience, and of course that audience overlaps with our other audiences. Here's the difference: we look at it in a P&L statement. Okay, it's got advertising. Some of it's in-house advertising, and we associate an internal cost for that. Some of it's external advertising, and we actually make revenue from that. We also look at it from a data perspective, how many of our subscribers to the print magazine show up to events and paid events. And so we look at it as a marketing platform for how does it contribute to the business, but we also look at it from a P&L standpoint of how does it actually contribute to itself. In other words, is it continuing to build value for us as an investment, as a product, that is also a marketing platform for us to drive more attendees to Content Marketing World, more attendees to Intelligent Content, more subscribers to our email database, and so on and so forth. And we've got the numbers to show it, right? We show that there is a correlation, if not causation, between people who subscribe to our print magazine and the quality of people that we get at events. And we've done the calculus to say, if you subscribe to the print magazine, you are basically 9 times out of 10 more likely to not only attend webinars, but to also attend events, pay for those events, and bring a team to those events. And so we've put a monetary value on that to say a subscriber to the print magazine is worth XYZ number of dollars because we see that happen over time. That's the way we do the calculus on valuing our audience.
Mm-hmm. And then you're saying same thing, but for content marketing, correct?
Exactly. For everything we do, including, by the way, consulting and advisory, right? Consulting and advisory for me is a wonderful revenue generator for my own, how I pay my rent. But it's also a marketing platform for CMI because I can show you that basically 8 out of the 10 consulting engagements I do, those people will attend Content Marketing World, and all of them will bring more than one person. And so every consulting engagement I do means 2 or 3 or 4 people are going to come to Content Marketing World from that engagement. So I can point to, and it's not a big number, but I can point to 20 or 30 people coming every single year from consulting and advisory to Content Marketing World, and multiply that by the attendance fee. And that's your revenue generator. But by the way, we're not spending any money; we're making money as we do that. Mm-hmm. So it is ultimately a revenue generator from a marketing standpoint, bringing more people in. But it's also a revenue generator from the fact that it pays my rent for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I hear you. I think we've gotten people's minds in the right place. It's not just all over the place. It's like no.
It's the value of something. Audiences will do things for you that other people won't. Deliver value to an audience, and they will do nice things for you, and they will tell you what they will buy. That's the brilliance of having and engaging and creating value for an audience, is that they will tell you what you should make and what they will purchase from you.
And you can always ask too.
That's exactly it.
Right? What do you want to know more about? Right.
What would you? Well, literally, what would you buy? We did a silly experiment just to prove this point when we were doing the podcast, and we were, on average getting right around 40 or 50,000 downloads every month, and we said, what is it we could make? Like, what product would we make that you would buy? Come take this poll and tell us. And we had so many people come in and say, well, we'd buy T-shirts, because some of the catchphrases we had on the podcast, some of the fun, weird stuff, bumper stickers, we could have productized the podcast and created a revenue stream out of that. And we calculated how much money we could have made it. And it was a fascinating little experiment. But creating value, wonderful value for an audience is, first of all, just a great, wonderful thing to do philosophically. But then secondly, you can ask them and say, what would you buy from us? And they'll tell you. And it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And you say it's philosophical. I almost slightly disagree with you. I think it's a tangible, real thing. I think you need money does not precede value. Value precedes money. And you got to put all value in the world, and then it will manifest into income and money.
Exactly. What I mean philosophical is I mean, just
No,
it's so much more interesting to get out of bed every morning and deliver value to a customer rather than figure out how you can incrementally get one more SEO revenue point.
Exactly right.
It's just a more interesting way to spend your life.
It's the best. It's really the only way you should spend your life. I'm with you, buddy. All right, let's get down to some nuts and bolts. Probably have you for another 20 minutes or so.
Sure.
We've talked 10,000-foot overview of it, and I love that, and I really love that. I think hopefully we got some people thinking, a little bit differently about all of this. And I want to circle this back around to the original topic, which is we're talking about getting other people involved in the organization. And we talked how there's not a one-size-fits-all. It's going to depend on bandwidth. It's going to depend on talent in the company. It's going to depend on opportunity. It's going to depend on lots of things, right? But let's just say you're trying to get 2 people involved or 20 people involved or 200 people involved, okay? Alignment is obviously so paramount. Just touching on a lot of the things you said, being able to say no. You shouldn't even barely ever have to say no if everybody's aligned. Of course, you need to have the stopgaps to get to the point where you're not saying no anymore because everyone's 100% aligned. That's not going to happen from day 1 or day 30 or day 60 or 1 year even maybe, but who knows? Just depends. So what pointers do you have to make sure everyone that is producing content is on the same page and continues to stay on the same page as you move along?
Well, the short answer is over-communicate. It's in my workshops and in my advisories, as I go through sort of the responsibilities of that team that we talked about at the top of the show, I point to internal activation and participation, and I say this is not even close. It's by far the most important part of what you will do. Ensuring that the rest of the organization, because it gets really easy to not do that. And it gets really easy to put our heads down and just assume that everybody knows what we're doing and why we're doing it, and really get buried into the work. And sometimes it's not our fault, quite frankly. We just get so inundated with work, we forget to communicate to the rest of the organization what and why and where we're doing what we're doing. And so over-communicating to your constituencies, sales, brand, PR, the CEO, whoever it is, about what it is you're doing, the wins that you're getting, the value that you're building, and getting out of your cubes to go figure out and do measurements is the most important thing. And that last one is an important one, because one of the things that we often get caught up in is, how are we going to measure this? One of the best ways to do both communication and measurement is to get out and start running some tests. Great example with this, I worked with a financial services company, and they were measuring clicks and views and downloads and all of the things that we all measure, the vanity metrics of how much content consumption is going on. But one of the biggest things that they did was to actually go set up a 1-week embed, if you will, with their sales team and start seeing how they were using the content marketing platform that they built, which in this case was a blog. And what they discovered was that the sales guys absolutely loved it. Now, would they have said that in a poll, or would they have said that in a report? Probably not. But as they went and interviewed the sales guys and watched them work and use blog posts as a source of presentation and send links to their clients and send links to their prospects, it was an amazing thing for them to watch. And they actually did a measurement as they were doing that in the embed of how many links were sent, how many, they did qualitative where they were interviewing the sales guys. And then they communicated that to the C-suite and to everybody and said, look, we have one of our biggest proponents in sales. We're doing such an amazing job. It's so great. And then they moved on. They moved on to brand, and they moved on. And so getting out of the cubes and actually moving throughout the organization and communicating why this thing exists, why this product exists, is it's maybe the biggest and most important part of a content marketing approach.
Awesome. So you mentioned over-communicate, and let's just draw on your experience. What have you seen? And again, give me a small and a large, okay?
Yeah.
Small company, large company. Like ongoing, what advice do you have for checkpoints, meeting points? Is it, as you get going, hey, you suggest, you're meeting weekly about this, and then as you get going every other week, and then monthly, or, just ongoing, like, what structure can you provide somebody? Because I love what you're saying, but at the same time, on the other end of it, if they're just getting into this, and you probably have forgotten more than you know, right? And you probably have, like, you've seen it all, and you just know, oh, this is how, and you just already know. But can you verbalize that and help people, like, hey, this is how I've seen other people have a nice structure, and it's, moving. Just help us out with that. What have you seen?
So there are 3 levels that I typically see working here. So the first level is what I would call executional, right? So these are your writers, the people on your team, people who are providing content, and in some cases, in a small company, that's once a week, your editorial calendaring meeting, whatever's going on. It's just basically everybody getting together and saying, are we all on the same page? What's the calendar look like? What's social, what are the gaps? What do we see? Basically that once a week. Or, in some cases, if you've got a really high cadence publication, this is your daily stand-up if you're a news type of organization. So everything from daily stand-up to once a week to even, in very slow-moving organizations, big or small, maybe once a month, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have that middle layer, what I call the governance layer. And this is where the leadership in the group is going out and saying, great, here's what I'm communicating to, it's outbound communications, right? So this is either the team's leadership in a bigger organization or, quite frankly, maybe a single person. And this is, hi CEO, here's the latest what we're doing. Here's the wins. Here's the dashboard. Here's the thing, and getting that socialized out to the organization in terms of here's what we're doing. And that can literally be the responsibility of one person, maybe the person in the content marketing group in a small company, and it may be the leadership team of the content marketing team in a larger company. The third group, and this is the important one in a bigger company and often doesn't exist in a smaller company, is what I call an editorial board, or whatever makes sense for your organization. It's the cross-functional group that meets to say, what are your needs? What are we not providing that you need, and what do I need out of you? It's sort of the alignment meeting, if you will. And in many bigger or mid-sized companies, what I'll do is I'll say, hey, this is where you have a 5 or 10% role commitment from somebody in PR, somebody in sales, somebody in brand marketing, wherever the rest of the organization is, somebody in account services. And you get together, again, maybe once a month, just to make sure everybody's aligned in what we know and what content is getting mined out of the organization, what's getting pushed into the organization, so that everybody's clear on what the content marketing team is doing.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing, what I heard, at least what I think I heard, is you obviously have your, the ongoing doers, the getting everything rolling, and you need to have more frequent meetings on that to make sure. We're hitting deadlines.
Yeah, just by sheer necessity, right?
Exactly. And then you have your once a month, alignment reviews, and I assume that's probably when you do your goals and measurements. Of course, if you're a super large organization that's getting, a million hits a month, you probably won't be wanting to track real fast, right? But it's still less than the editorial ongoing meetings and making sure everybody's aligned. And then you have like an overview to say, hey, let's, and that's where you go with your tracking. And of course, on the note of tracking, you're not just gonna want to see how many shares you're getting. You need to make sure you get all your tracking set up, right? So that's
and you can see the order of operations in that. And I went a little out of order there, right? So you say, so it's your daily stand up or your executional meeting. Part of the agenda of that meeting is to say, what are the key KPIs that we're hitting? What's going on? What's, basically thumb to the wind. How's the wind blowing, basically? Mm-hmm. Out of that comes measurement that you as a leader in the organization then go, great, I'm taking that to my meeting with my cross-functional teams. And I'm saying, hey, sales, we're noticing a lot of this, X, Y, and Z. Let's go talk to you. Let's set up a separate meeting where we come in and talk to you about how we can get out of our cubes and come meet with you. Hey, PR, we haven't heard anything from you lately. What's going on? We need to blah, 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 blah. We had this cross-functional meeting, and we get
individually on each of these functions.
And we get measurements, and we get, basically what I call our secondary sort of key KPIs. How are we doing? How are we doing there? That then translates up into how are we progressing against the goals that we have, which then informs that PowerPoint or that Word doc or whatever it is that we send around to the C-suite, my boss, whoever it is that we need to communicate to say, hey, listen, at an executional level, here's what's going on. We're doing great. At the editorial board level, here's what our roadmap looks like. We're going to go talk to PR. We're going to go do, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then at the highest level, here's how we're progressing against our goals. Now everybody's clear on what we're doing, and the right audiences are getting the right level of information.
And yeah, that last part, yeah, talking with the salespeople, it's so paramount because they're talking to everybody, they're hearing stuff, and consistently staying, having your pulse on with them. They have their pulse on what's going on, literally, and customer service too. We didn't mention the word, but same thing. What are you hearing? What are the questions? How's this resonating? Where are your gaps?
They can be a great source of stories. They can be a great source of gaps. The last thing you want, the absolute last thing you want, is for anybody to get the question, "Hey, how's that content thing working for you?" And they go, "I don't know. I never hear from those guys."
Love it. Awesome. Now, kind of a boring-ish kind of question, and you're kind of touching on it, but like, what's your process in management as far as like the content coming in? Like, how have you seen people manage that where it doesn't get so overwhelming and everything? And I don't know if this is too granular of a question. I mean, I guess we could have different content,
Well, it's going to be different. Yeah, it's going to be different for different businesses. There's no doubt about that. But the critical thing, and this goes again back to all the way, the through line throughout today's show is how do we set up a production strategy that makes sense for our business? I think one of the critical foundations that whether you're a story helping organization or a storytelling organization, in other words, whether your job is to create content or to just package and reuse content, the key is to have a proactive editorial strategy that takes up X, Y, Z amount of your time. Maybe that's 50%, 60%. It's more than half. So basically, here's what we're doing, organization. This is what we're doing. The classic challenge is that most content marketing organizations are exactly the opposite. As we talked about in the very beginning, they're getting inundated with demands if they're a content creation organization. In other words, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. And they're just spewing out content like a little Dr. Seuss machine. And then if they're a story helping organization, they're getting inundated. Here's this, here's that, here's this, here's that. And their job is to just publish and publish and publish and publish. We have to flip that script. In other words, there has to be a strategy where the content marketing organization, whether one person or 20, says, no, rest of the company, here's what we're doing for the next 6 months, 8 months. Some of this is going to be exactly what you need. Some of it's not. We're going to dedicate 30, 40, 20% of our time, our team's time, to meet your on-demand needs, either in a push or pull fashion. and we will handle your requests accordingly. That has to happen. Otherwise, what happens is that you fill the beaker full of demands, and you never scale, and you never get a strategy, and you never build what it is you intend to build. And that's where misalignment comes. It's basically the source of everything, which is getting your arms around the influx of content, either from an on-demand perspective or a push perspective, and figuring out how you're going to balance that with a much more proactive, strategic, here's what we want to say to the world, and some of that's going to be what you need, and some of it's not, and we'll meet the rest of it and balance your requests accordingly.
No, I love what you put there. Leave that buffer in there, and that little buffer will allow you to fill it in with the requests that you don't know about, and it's going to happen. It better happen, or you're not getting feedback. And you're not getting new ideas. No, I love that pointer. And let me whet the palate on some of the good stuff that could come here for people as you get out of your, no, we're the content marketers, we're the editorial team, we're the ones who know how to write, this is our thing, right?
Right.
No, limited, scarcity way of thinking, go bigger, go outside, right? So I want you, if you have one, and if you don't, you don't, but do you have any stories to share of like an out of the box idea that was created and developed due to the content marketing team or the marketing team opening this up to other people? Do you ever seen something like really cool that just pops, out of your mind there?
I'll give you one. Yeah, one that pops out, and this is a small company, really small company, in fact. And they're I think 18 or 20 people total. And in their company, they're a financial services company and a consulting company. And as you might expect, their audience, their customers, their marketplace are senior level, like heavy duty financial analysts, hedge fund managers, pension fund managers, like the BlackBerry staringest of all BlackBerry, Bloomberg terminal staringest of people, right? And so these people are no nonsense stuff. And so one of the things, and they were doing what you might expect from a content perspective. Here's our videos on our strategy and our process and our thinking, and here's white papers, and here's articles, and here's all this stuff. And they were, they're getting some level of success out of that. And in a conversation from one of the account services people with one of their customers, they discovered that one huge challenge of this particular audience, and then they, after this conversation, they actually went out and researched with their customers to see if this was, they validated the truth here, which was these Bloomberg staring, BlackBerry staring people had no idea what they should be doing on their vacation. Or what they should be doing in their spare time. In other words, what books they should be reading.
God, my brain just went boom.
Yeah, right. what theaters what shows they should be seeing, what music they should be listening to, et cetera, et cetera. They were just so wrapped up in their own worlds that they didn't. So they set up this curation, which they called their book club. And it ultimately expanded into other things like music, into theater and stuff like that. But what they would do is they started sending this content, and they knew that this audience didn't have a lot of time, so that what they sent was not books. They did send free books, basically, but the initial piece was, as a subscription-based thing to all of their clients, was here are the book reports of the things that you should be reading. Not financial books, but rather, here's the latest in fiction, here's the latest comedy, here's the latest science fiction, here's the latest, this. And if you read the book, and it was in this beautiful piece, and they, made it was kind of like a magazine, but, not quite that polished. And they would send it to you in the physical mail. You would get it, and you read the thing. And then there was an email and a URL, and you could go as a client and say, I want that book. And then they would send it to you. They would send you the book, and it basically, at their cost, right? So they would send you the book if you liked the book report that they wrote on it. And it became, when they did their client retention poll, became their number 2 reason that clients renewed year after year, which was this silly little book club that they set up, which none of their competitors were going to be able to compete with, right? It's such a wonderfully differentiating service that they can provide to their customers that has nothing to do with financial planning, of course, but it has everything to do with financial planning because it adds value to the financial planner's life.
That's a fantastic example. Let me just, big picture here. that never would have happened without content marketing. And
No,
that's
exactly.
a perfect example of a residual effect that you can get out of taking the mindset of let's be helpful, let's be educational, let's go that direction with our marketing.
Let's add an experience. Let's add another experience to our customers' lives that helps them trust us, engage with us, and get more value out of their relationship with us.
And who knows where it's going to lead. It
Of
can be
course.
the number 2 retention thing for a company.
Yeah.
Which, how do you, what value would you put on that, right?
Yeah.
How can you even put a
Well,
dollar
and for
value?
them, I mean, they can directly show that the retention, I mean, because their customers spend a big ton of money for them on a subscription to their service every year. And so, you know, from a, it was
can't
a
put a money
funding error in
you
their
could put
marketing
a dollar
budget to
in it,
send
yeah.
them a couple of paperbacks.
Yeah. No, I just think that's so brilliant. I love hearing good ideas. It always gets me excited. So let's go on the flip side of that real quick before I have to let you go. What are the common mistakes people make when trying to integrate this into the fabric of their marketing plans or their content marketing plans, and that people should be aware of? And let's specifically talk about getting everybody involved, right?
Yeah.
So in the spirit of that, where have you seen people like really mess up?
Well, the biggest one is that the business in some form or fashion, maybe it's a groundswell up or maybe it's a top down, it's usually the former, not the latter, decides that content marketing is something they should do. And the immediate knee-jerk reaction is to say, great, let's just start producing stuff. Let's just start making content and use it as an alternative for our other programs. In other words, using it as an alternative for our inbound marketing bait or, our, outbound marketing, having the sales guys selling a white paper now instead of selling, a meeting with the VP or, basically treating it like an alternative form of sales or marketing collateral material, because that's the first inclination of how we'll measure it. And what ends up happening is it works for a little while. In other words, it works for the first 3 or 4 or 5 months. And then all of a sudden a weird thing happens where all of a sudden they run through the sort of low-hanging fruit. I hate that sort of cliche, but they sort of run through the early opportunities. And all of a sudden it starts to get hard because they either run out of ideas or they run out of audience to market this stuff to, or both. And that's where all of a sudden people go, oh, it doesn't work, it's so hard and it's expensive and it doesn't pay back. And sales guys get, really frustrated with the whole process. And then that's when they start going, hey, I just need better collateral material. I just need better one sheets. Can you just do that? And that's the biggest mistake I see it making. Instead of saying, okay, we want to do content marketing, let's take a pause and a deep breath and let's talk about what it is we're trying to do. Let's get to all those things you talked about at the very beginning, a purpose, a focus. Why are we going to do this? What does our editorial strategy look like? How do we treat this like a product, not a campaign? What are we trying to get to? What are our goals? Really just thinking through to measure twice before we cut once and create a strategy. It's literally that simple. Just, take a breath and take the time. And that's really the answer.
I hear it. And from a full marketing campaign, again, not content marketing, but marketing, content marketing, again, all that stuff, the white papers, the sales demos, collateral, benefits of your services, that all has a part in the distribution of your message. That's just later. It's just later. Just wait.
Or simultaneously or whatever it is, it's separate.
Yes.
It's just different.
It's integrated together with this. So great point. Awesome. Robert, how can people learn from you? And I suggest everyone does because...
Well, you're very kind to say. Look, if you're interested in the thinking, contentadvisory.net has all the blog posts and white papers and stuff like that these days of what I'm on to and talking about and all those things. And if you're just interested in sort of me and the books or anything like that, you can get it at robertrose.net. I use both. I did .net because somebody told me it was the dad genes of domains. So there you go.
All right. Well, very cool, Robert. I'm looking forward to the next one. Have yourself a great rest of your week here.
Thank you very much, sir. Great to be on.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the latest podcast. Feel free to go to magnificent.com/blog to see the show notes for this interview, as well as those from many other of the world's top marketing experts. Have a great day.